Welcome to Kitchen Table Finance.
Hey, Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
Doing well. I got my, for our YouTube watchers, I got my vacation shirt on, fresh off of vacation. So,
You look like you should have a garland of flowers around your neck to
yeah,
go with
well,
it.
I thought about wearing my Tigers hat to complete
Yeah.
the entire Tom Selleck ensemble, but
Did you show up in a Ferrari? That's my only concern.
well, summer is upon us, Dave. Heat wave is coming here in Michigan, so I hope you're ready for it up north.
Believe it or not, I left windows open last night because it was kind of warm yesterday. My furnace was running this morning.
Oh, wow.
That will change here this afternoon from the looks of it. So,
Yeah, summer is here. So with that, Dave, we are going to jump into our retirement planning headlines, where we read the news, so you don't have to read the bad stuff, just the stuff we recommend, right?
yep, we'll take the pain for you.
Yeah. So first article comes from the Wall Street Journal on the mistakes you're making in today's stock market without even knowing it.
Yeah, good old Jason Zweig, who I think he shows up every month when we do this with some gem,
Mhm.
some piece of wisdom. Basically comes down to recency bias, I think.
Yeah.
But he talks about how people now believe that growth investing crushes value because it has for the last decade or so. I forget the
Right.
exact numbers,
Mhm.
but that the underpinnings of stock market valuation still hold, and so it'd be a mistake to turn away from value stocks and focus on growth stocks. And we've talked about that before.
Oh yeah.
Um, Another one, focusing on U.S. markets as opposed to international markets. And
Mhm.
again, recency bias would tell us there's no reason to buy anything international. Now, really recent recency bias would tell us the opposite because international stocks have done phenomenally well,
Yeah.
um, over the last couple months here. But especially relative to U.S. stocks. So, maybe we're seeing those trends reverse, but it just kind of reminds us that the principles of diversification always apply. You should own some growth, you should own some value. We like to emphasize value stocks for reasons we've talked about before. You should own the
Yeah.
whole world in your portfolio because you
Right.
never know when that change is going to happen between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that this brings to mind too is just the importance of rebalancing, right? Because as you had those big run ups in US markets versus international, like if you're not rebalancing your portfolio, you're automatically kind of getting overweight into categories that you probably don't necessarily want to. So just another thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got a few other nuggets in there about things that have like happened recently that kind of um, lead people to make mistakes, thinking about cash and gold and different things in different ways. So it's a good read. That one's some good principles to remind people of.
The next article, also from the Wall Street Journal, talking about Social Security benefits.
Yeah.
And there's actually, we have a couple articles on Social Security benefits because that has been in the news recently. But this one kind of talks a little bit more about how people are making decisions as it relates to collecting benefits, right, Dave?
Yeah, and fear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Around, I might as well go ahead and start my Social Security benefit now, is if they're over 62, instead of
Yep.
waiting, to have it go up in value over time, out of fears that it's not going to be there for them. We get that a lot from clients and prospective clients too. And I always kind of wonder, like, what makes you think that, like, starting it today, other than the fact maybe you'll get a few payments done, but it's not like you're locking in anything that's sacred any
Right.
more than any other promises Social Security has made. Really step back and think about how valid are those fears, and do you really want to make life-changing decisions around an emotional idea like that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that we always talk about around here too is, people make the most biggest financial mistakes, the worst financial mistakes when there's based on emotions, right? And so it's one of those situations where stepping back and actually thinking about it and actually looking at these things as opposed to, a lot of people come in with, well, my neighbor took Social Security benefits early because they were afraid and now I'm afraid, whatever it is, right? And compounding that is this another article on Social Security insolvency and, the official trustees are not surprisingly, saying that things are a little bit worse than when they projected before, and now the estimate nearly 23% cut in benefits for Social Security, plus 11% in Medicare in 8 years, which probably isn't all that unsurprising given the inflation rate and what we've seen.
Right,
Anytime you increase
right.
payments by 5% or so, which is much higher than they usually are a couple of years ago, that's going to only
Yeah.
make that trust fund go down, right?
Those time frames are always based on nobody doing anything to fix the problem.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We've probably beat up on this topic plenty
Yeah.
over the last few years, but it comes down to the idea that no politician is going to want to sit and preside or sit in Congress during the demise of the most popular thing the federal government has ever done
Yeah.
and take money out of the hands of the largest voting bloc in the country in American seniors. So, will there be some pain? Will there be some adjustments? Sure, but we've said this a million times. I think at this point, the idea of them taking benefits away from seniors in any meaningful way, truly like painful way, I think is a real stretch.
Yeah, I agree. And even just on the base of it, like you said, I agree with you. They're going to make some changes. But if there was a 23% cut in benefits, that's going to be on the benefit that you choose. So if you choose early retirement, you're getting a lower payment. And now you're getting a cut on that lower payment, right? And so that goes to that emotional decision making process of, might be better for you to wait, but certainly something that you want to go into with the right thinking in making that decision.
Yeah, yeah.
Another one from the Wall Street Journal on retirement medical costs and some of the unexpected costs that our retirees are facing. I think the big one, well, there's three things that stuck out to me, but the big one, drug coverage, and making sure that you have drug coverage when you're on Medicare and you're thinking through those supplemental plans, making sure you make a conscientious effort to try to see what kind of coverage you're going to get for the prescriptions you're on, because not all those plans are created equally.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing that people sometimes, it's so hard. Once you get anywhere near 65, everybody and their brother comes out of the woodwork to try to sell you some sort of plan.
Yeah. The other confounding factor here, too, is you've got to not just think about what you're taking right now, but how that might look 5, 10, 15 years in the future,
Right.
and kind of plan ahead for how that might look.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, we always recommend going to talk to an independent agent that kind of
Hmm.
knows those policies, because one of the first things that they will usually do is ask you what kind of prescription drug coverage or what
Yep.
kind of prescription drugs you have. And there is software out there that they can use to determine like what policy is going to be better for you than
Hmm.
the other based on what kind of prescriptions that you have. And so I think that's an important thing that not everybody realizes. The other one on this list was isolation.
Yeah.
And just thinking about, and we've actually had some clients thinking through this, like if you're going to age in a certain area, how isolated are you from your doctors, from all those things that you need, because that can come with a big cost.
It can, and that is a very salient issue for those of us in rural communities right now. As every year, it seems healthcare in it becomes more centralized in cities, and they're trying to eke as much efficiency out of how they're set up as they can, and that's going to really impact how seniors think about where they locate. So, whole different topic, but definitely a cost to factor in.
Yep. And then the last one was concierge care options, which essentially boils down to, there's less doctors out there and there's less of them that are willing to kind of take on the keep you healthy moniker, and it's harder to find them. And so people are actually going and paying monthly subscriptions to get that kind of care outside of the general, here's your prescription, go home, take this, call me in the morning if it doesn't work kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so, putting out, thousands of dollars a year for that extra care, which I think is a great idea, but it's not necessarily something people always plan for, right?
Right, right. And, I don't want to jump down too deep a rabbit hole on this, but it worries me about what that eventually, like, what's the end game of that in terms of the whole healthcare system.
Well, it's just one of those things that, it's not just as you age and get older. I think everybody needs to invest in their health, right? And, you can't get everything from your doctor that you need to have a fully robust, healthy lifestyle. And
Yeah,
so planning that into your budget, I think, is super important.
yeah.
So now we go to one of the regulars on this list. Morningstar, is an annuity right for you from Christine Benz.
Right. And so this, I don't think we need to go into too much detail on this, but my reason for including it on the list was there's so much bad stuff out there regarding annuities that's so sales oriented that when I see something that I agree with on like the right uses for annuities and how to think about them, I want to amplify it.
Oh, for sure.
Christine Benz probably doesn't need us to amplify her platform, but we'll do what we can, right? So she basically talks about focusing on your goals for your money
Hmm.
and how that may be served by an annuity, but also consider the downsides of an annuity in terms of flexibility and costs and capped returns. And there's no free ride, there's no free lunch. The idea of guaranteed income from an annuity may play a role in your portfolio. You've got to look at all sides.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it's one of those things that, I imagine people think that we hate on annuities, which is not the case. What I do hate on, which I will always stand by, is that people get sold them without really understanding what it is, what they're paying for, is it right for them. We've just seen too much of that because of the commission structure on these things. But we have clients with annuities, for the right person, the right situation, it's absolutely the right thing. But that's just not everybody. And so you got to be careful with making that decision, just like any decision, because it, again, gets sold on some of that emotional, the emotional side of things. And then that's when you see those poor decisions.
We love to focus on the behavioral aspects of personal finance and how that works with the investment side. And I'm fascinated by the new research talking about how annuitization, guaranteed income, often helps people get over the psychological hurdle of spending their money
Yeah, for
by
sure.
turning it into a paycheck instead of, oh,
Hmm.
I have to take money out of savings. Instead, it's just, hey, you've got a paycheck in your deposit being deposited in the bank every month, and you might as well spend it just like you did your paycheck. The other thing, we just to close the loop on annuities, and doesn't have much to do with this article, is I think we've both seen an evolution over our careers in annuities.
Mm.
That the annuity providers are realizing that they're missing out by not producing better products that guys
Yeah.
like you and me are going to promote. And so I think we've definitely seen some ground gained in that regard.
It's interesting because it's kind of like full circle of like the original, just basic, straightforward annuity. And then we swung the other direction with all these bells and whistles. And now we're coming back to like the basic, like,
Back to the original concept of creating a pension for yourself instead of all these bells and whistles to make it you feel better about buying them that just come with costs. And
right. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so good.
So, speaking of emotionally based decision making, and too much of a good thing might not be that. Barry Ritz.
Ritholtz, yeah, fast becoming one of my favorite writers. The more I read from him, reminding us not to take candy from strangers. Never take candy from strangers is the title, and what he's talking about is um, the idea that there's no, like, if somebody's giving you free advice in the financial realm, you're the
Yeah.
product, right?
Yeah.
I liked it because it's appealing to like our roots and growing up in the 70s.
Right.
Everybody remembers being taught not to take candy from strangers, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing for free, and whether it's a newsletter or TikToks of, advice. There's consider what's in it for them.
I love this piece where he goes on to like, if you're getting something for free, if a stranger offers you something for free, you need to ask yourself, who are they? What do they want? And do they have your best interest at heart? What's in it for them, right? Like just basic questions that you can kind of see where things are going and why they're going there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then also just on a more broad level of, consumer financial content, just understanding what media you're consuming and making intelligent, well-informed choices about that. And then I love this, prioritizing quality over quantity, right? Don't try to read everything, just read from good, solid quality sources.
And to kind of illustrate why becoming a fast fan of Barry, he puts right in there, here's why I'm writing this. I want you to follow me. I want you to, come to me for financial advice. So I'm putting this out there, and I've got something to sell just like any other author would. You and I have a stake in, producing a good podcast, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's going to be true of anything you read, anything you see that's out there.
Going back to the Wall Street Journal, I love that you threw this one in here. And this is as we are both familiar with, the cost of owning a dog.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah, all too aware. But they break it down. They look at the upfront cost of owning a dog, which is what most people think of, right?
Right.
But then the ongoing costs and food and grooming and daycare and
Mhm.
boarding and your box full of toys that seems to be restocked daily by someone in the
Right.
family at least. This has kind of been on my mind lately, and maybe deserves a bigger discussion from us, is pet insurance,
Yeah.
because it has gotten very expensive,
Yeah.
and we become more and more attached to our furry friends. Pet insurance, what were they estimating, like $40 to $60 a month, but then your coverage is $5,000 with a $500 deductible, an 80% reimbursement rate. Is that worth it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of those where you really have to kind of think back to like how often you're going to the vet, how often, like, do you have a dog that's always, or a cat that's, constantly needing things, then maybe.
Hmm.
But in the insurance realm, and I know you kind of share the sentiment too, like when I think about insurance, I'm thinking about like, okay, what's a cost that's going to, put a financial strain on me that I might not be able to cover? And to be honest with you, $5,000 for pet care, you should have that in an emergency fund if you're going to have a pet, like ideally.
Right.
If you don't, then probably having that $40 to $50 monthly premium to cover that so it doesn't,
Yeah.
capsize your ship financially. But ideally, you'd rather have, a decent emergency fund to pay for those things and not have the monthly premium outlay, because at those numbers, it's usually going to be less expensive to self-insure, unless you have a dog that that every year you're going to have $5,000 worth of medical costs.
We might have that just in porcupine quill removal. Anyway, yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's been on my mind in terms of cost, not in terms of actually buying the insurance. But
But I will tell you that these numbers are getting better because they used to be a lot worse, right? Like it used to be you're paying $50 a month and you're only getting like $2,000 of coverage, and
yeah,
like,
and that's interesting. And I don't. This is just purely speculation on my part. But as more and more people buy pet insurance, you get more and more benefit of shared costs, right? Which is at the heart, that's what insurance is all about, is sharing that risk. So
switching gears, from Business Insider, timing retirement for older Americans. The headline screams you should delay retirement if possible due to recession, economic uncertainty, which is definitely one of those clickbait headlines.
mhm.
I mean, the main premise is to delay retirement if you can. And I guess that I would argue the first thing that you probably need to do is see where you stand.
Right.
But there's never going to be a perfect time to retire. And if you're waiting for the perfect time, you might be waiting much longer than you should.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I was reading this, I just kept going back to like every retirement plan that we've ever done has the premises of like, okay, what happens if the worst thing that could possibly happen happens tomorrow?
Yeah. We literally plug in October like you're retiring in October of 2007. You know what comes next. How does this work? And yeah, that was my thoughts was if your financial plan is precarious enough that that would upset it, then you're probably not ready to retire anyway.
Yeah, right.
Then thinking about how lousy, like everybody's on edge about the economy right now, which actually makes me feel better about it,
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
honest.
right.
Because normally, like conventional wisdom, trying to predict when a recession is going to come is the statistics are impressive in a
Yeah, right.
in the negative sense.
Yeah,
No one knows what's going to happen. You want to be ready for a recession in the first year of retirement, the third year of retirement, the 30th year of retirement,
right.
because no one is going to be able to predict it for you.
Yeah,
Like, to bring it full circle, I kind of agree with them. If your plan is precarious enough that like a recession next year is going to upset it, yeah, you probably shouldn't retire. You should
yeah,
step back and rethink your
right.
retirement plan overall.
Yeah,
But it's not like I'm just basing that on the fact that you're worried about it,
yeah, right.
you know, not the fact that I think there's going to be a recession this fall. And there may be, there may not be. I'm not going to be silly enough to pretend to know.
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting too because one of the other points was hold off on changing investments, which I don't know exactly when this was written. It might have been written when the market was down, but like if you have more stock than you should, this is not necessarily a bad time to get yourself into the right portfolio because stocks have not, it's not like we're at the bottom of some sort of major bear market, right?
You were gone last week, but that was the basic premise that Cole and I were discussing was, we've kind of recovered from all the volatility we had early in the spring. We're
Hmm.
back to, a little bit above even right now. Go listen to that podcast. But if you were one of those people that was like, holy crud, what am I going to do?
Right.
Now's the time to, you've been given a commutation of your
Yeah.
sentence.
Right. Yeah.
Go reevaluate. Don't just say, whew.
Yeah, right. Unlike 2008 when it was too late is
Yeah,
immediately when it started,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
The other one that I thought, and I've actually seen this in practice, and I'm sure you have too, longevity planning beyond money. And one of the
Hmm.
things that we see is that loneliness and boredom can make you fixated on the economy when you retire. And that's one of those things where it's like, okay, like you need to have a plan for that, right? Because what you don't want to do is retire and just worry about your money all the time.
Yeah, if you've got nothing better to do than watch the news, you're going to have a problem. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
exact. Our next article comes from the University of Michigan study on Michiganders, especially older ones, and where they're at in terms of long-term care planning. So they surveyed, I think, 65 and older about 5 things they can do to plan for long-term care, and the statistics were sobering, I guess is the right word for that, in terms of like who's done what, especially this first one, which they kind of pointed out in the article. But completing a durable power of attorney form. So they asked everybody, and only 25% of respondents had actually a completed signed durable power of attorney form, which is a problem, right?
Hmm.
So those power of attorney forms, there's 2 of them, right? One for financial and one for medical decisions.
Yes.
Those are super important, not crazy, outrageous, expensive. I think the state of Michigan even has like a fill in the blank one that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So if you're one of those 75%, time to make some decisions and get some stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And then the other 4 things were identifying potential caregivers among the people in your life. Only 24% of people making home modifications to help age in place, only 17%. Buying long-term care insurance, 7%. Caveat there, not everybody needs to buy long-term care insurance, but you should at least have gone through the process of identifying, do I need it? Do I not need it? What does it look like?
Yeah.
And then looking into or visiting assisted living facilities or nursing homes was the other one. So, I think this is a good list of things that, people should be thinking about and having conversations with,
Hmm.
especially like the caregiver one, right? Like not only identifying, but having an actual conversation with who you think that person's going to be.
Yeah. You need to let them know, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And so it's just one of those things that, it's interesting to see where people land on this, but also hopefully a call to action for some of our listeners out there of like, hey, these are things that we should probably start looking into having conversations around. All right. Back to the Wall Street Journal, Dave.
Yeah, couple quick ones here, kind of lifestyle, working lifestyle, money related, and also economy. One headline being more workers are putting in extra hours during the work after the workday. The amount of side hustle growth that we're seeing, people taking second jobs.
Yeah.
The full title is Americans are side hustling like we're in a recession.
Yeah.
And I thought these two were interesting, and they kind of pair together in terms of like how we think about the economy and what we're doing with our lives for money.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently, I guess obviously it's a no-brainer, right? But Microsoft has all this data now on like how often people log into
Oh, yeah,
their,
sure.
yeah, because we all have online subscriptions for
Right.
work. Not
Right.
all of us, but a lot of us have online subscriptions through work to all the Microsoft products. So they know like, hey, 15 million people logged in between 8 p.m. and 2 in the morning yesterday. Where we see this as an important thing to think about is like when you are considering retirement and work, are you letting work get beyond the point where it's worth it? I guess is one way to, one thing that I was thinking of. And I also was wondering, and I want to ask my brother-in-laws about this because they both are engineers with teams overseas, like how much of this now is the fact that our global white collar workforce might include people in India and other places where somebody in Detroit might be doing a meeting with somebody in India at 2 in the morning so that it's daytime there. I don't know that, but I'd like to wonder how that feeds in.
So it's interesting because the work has definitely changed, right? I'm wearing my vacation shirt because I was on vacation, but I'd be lying to you if I said that I didn't log in and do some work while
I
on
know for a
vacation.
fact that you did.
Now, in my defense, it was a vacation to with the in-laws in order for a graduation. So there was times when I needed a break, and work was that break. But out of all of us that traveled with remote jobs, almost all of us logged in and at least worked some of those days. And so it's a little bit different now with the ability to work from anywhere and remote work to be able to do that. And there's some pros and cons to that, right? Well, two things. One, for your own sanity, there's got to be times where you just unplug from all of that for extended periods of time or you are going to burn out. But two, especially as you're approaching retirement, right? If you find that you can't take time off without logging, like you're going to need to practice retirement. And that means not logging into work for extended periods of time. If you can get that time off too, I think is super beneficial for you to understand like what kind of mindset time you're going to be in going into retirement
Yeah.
when they won't allow you to log in anymore. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. It used to be that starting a side hustle might be about following a passion or, monetizing a hobby that you hope to become more than a hobby at some point. And what we're finding is that younger workers are taking on side hustles because they're very worried right now about losing their job. And I thought that was worth noting, and kind of has some of those same undertones, concerns for us about work life balance and how you think about that. The article didn't address this, but I had another thought related. Like is it necessarily a bad thing that people can do this? Does it mean people are overworked, or does it mean that they're so efficient at their main job that they have time to do more?
Right. Yeah.
And that could be a good thing if that thing is a creative outlet or some kind of additive thing to the economy.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people who do work remotely from home and they need some like social interaction. And so a lot of that
Hmm.
side hustle like brings some of that too, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
Interesting to see how this progresses because we did basically jumpstart the virtual culture by 10 years, so the fallout is still to come, right?
Right, right, Right.
Well, with that, Dave, this has been a pleasure as always. For our listeners,
Yeah.
if you have articles that you'd like us to review, please send them to info@srbadvisors.com. Make sure to check us out on YouTube so you can see my flower shirt and like and subscribe and all that fun stuff. Dave, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
These headlines are just the start. Get our take and what it could mean for your retirement in the full episode of Kitchen Table Finance. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or come visit us at srbadvisors.com.
See you next time on Kitchen Table Finance.
This is a Zedia Media production.